Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone joining us online. We have the most incredibly loyal, dedicated, ginormous, one of my grandkids' favorite words, Sangha that's all over the world. It's amazing. And it's dark outside. It's so weird, but I want to thank you because, I don't know, you came out and drove here in the dark and maybe you got to see a little twilight, but it's kind of a little bit more of an effort. And I appreciate you coming here. You could be many other places or cozy at home. So thank you. Thank you always to all of my teachers and all of our teachers and to Roshi Joan. That's kind of how we get to be here. Enormous effort, truly. So thank you, Roshi. So I'm going to start with this title of my talk, and then I'll say how it evolved. So the title of my talk is May We Be Nourished. May we be nourished. And often when we're kind of teasing out a word, I look it up and there's origins and all this. But I found this was interesting. I was kind of scrolling in these dictionaries, and this one had quotes from different people, what they said about nourished, which I thought was really interesting. So I'm going to share two. First one is Alice Waters. You probably know who she is, a famous chef. And she just said, to nourish someone is to feed them deeply, something that's very good for them. So kind of remember that. And the other one that struck me is Michael Pollan. You probably know who he is also. And he said, nourish is a very rich word because it has a kind of literal and metaphorical sense to it. We literally nourish ourselves with food, but we nourish our spirit, we nourish our culture, we nourish our community. You can feed yourself in many, many different ways. And that's the breadth of what I want to talk about. So here's the backstory. Last Saturday, we went to the farmer's market, Chuck and I, and it's just always so nourishing. It's beautiful. And the farmers are there and all these incredible fruits of the earth and their labors, and you get to talk to them. And at this time of year in Santa Fe, you also smell the roasting chilies. And so very excited. We don't get to go that much. We went to the farmer's market. And I had a spacious schedule, so I was going to have a day of cooking. And I brought home some chiles, chile poblano, really gorgeous, like shiny green chilies. And I didn't get the roasted ones. I got the fresh ones because I love to fill my house with the smell of roasting chiles. So we had some chile poblanos in these beautiful squash, which because we're farmers, we were kind of looking at. They said they were pumpkins, but I don't think they were pumpkins. I think they were red curries or something like that. Beautiful. So we gathered these ingredients for a pie for Chuck. If you know him, he's a pie guy. And to make chile rellenos. He's like, yes. So I lived in Mexico for many years, and I learned to make chile rellenos. And the way that I learned to make them is an all-day gig. Honestly, you're smiling. Your parents probably. You know, you make a sauce, but first you chop and roast vegetables so that you have these, and I won't go on and on, but it's a beautiful all-day process to make these chiles. Very excited to do that. And I sat down at the computer before starting, and I was looking for a link to a certain spreadsheet, but I happened to see the link that I have for Dharma Talks, and I said, I wonder who's talking this week. You can see where this story is going. So, what does Roshi say? The agenda is subject to reality. So it was really interesting because I also had a couple other busy days in my schedule, and I wasn't sure quite what I was going to do. And so I kind of, and sometimes I have something that's cooking, you know, some kind of topic that's really kind of juicy, but I had no idea. So I was pulling out some books, and then I was going through the kitchen looking at my vegetables. And just kind of thinking, how should I spend this day? How should I do this given this responsibility of preparing a Dharma talk? Oh, and also I did briefly try to squeeze out of it. I texted Kodo and said, what are some options? But honestly, it wasn't a good idea. So the way this evolved was really, really perfect because what I care about sharing about the Dharma with people is how the Dharma shows up in our daily lives. That's really what I care about, and how we show up in our daily lives. So I said, okay, I'm going to see what happens. I am going to honor this spectacular red curry squash, these beautiful chilies, and I'm going to cook. So maybe I'll call my talk Awakening with Chile Rellenos. That was my first idea. And it kind of is how it evolved, but that's not what I named my talk. But I really thought about, so if I was going to talk about awakening with Chile Rellenos, how do we? What is that? How do we do that well? By appreciating our life, resting moment by moment in what's here, and by letting ourselves be nourished by whatever activity is there. But it takes moving in, you know what I mean? So whatever activity is presenting itself, how can we be nourished by that? And that is what I want to talk about. So we let ourselves be nourished by our activity when we wake up and take care of our life, take care of each moment, but really bring this quality of loving awareness to what's in front of us. So I turned to my beautiful vegetables and I thought, I'm just going to attend and see what I learn in this day by really bringing a Tenzo's pure heart, which some of you know well, and with the care of a practitioner, trusting that by bringing this kind of care and attention to what was in front of me, I might discover what I wanted to say, what I had to share about that. And what I discovered was how deeply nourishing it is to bring love and care to what's in front of us. So what better Dharma to explore and share than that? At Upaya, at each meal, we chant this: earth, water, fire, air, and space combine to make this food. Numberless beings gave their lives and labors that we may eat. May we be nourished, that we may nourish life. So I started my day of cooking all the steps of this traditional recipe, so many steps. Arrange the tomatoes, onion, garlic, and pepper on parchment. Drizzle with avocado oil. Bake for 20 minutes. Let it cool. Take it from the oven. Meanwhile, the pumpkin pie. First, you have to roast the pumpkin. So beautiful. I cut this squash open and it was like the leaves of the cottonwoods. It was that golden. And I spent my day cooking step by step and hour after hour, just staying in relationship to everything. And this is being nourished and nourishing life. So in many Zen centers, the meal chant includes this: may we, with all beings, realize the emptiness of the three wheels: giver, receiver, and gift. All of life is always giving and receiving at the same time. And I want to share some words from Norman. Is this Norman? Yeah, from Norman Fisher. What he wrote about this emptiness of the three wheels. He says, no giver, no receiver, and no gift means that this giving isn't a beneficent act one performs for another, an act you can take credit for or feel worthy or unworthy of. A Zen practitioner remembers that giving is life, that everything is giving, everything is given. There are no separate givers, receivers, or gifts. And this is still Norman. All of life is always giving and receiving at the same time. This is our practice and our joy. So we practice giving, both receiving and giving gifts in this spirit. And this is the spirit of may we be nourished, that we may nourish life. So I want to share what I learned about the Dharma of being nourished, both from my experience that day and other days, and from some of my favorite teachings, from Dogen's instructions to the cook, which you will study in winter practice period. So beautiful, the Tenso Kyokun. And from braiding sweetgrass, which I notice it makes it into almost every single Dharma talk I give. It just always seems to have something to offer, and other teachings as well. So what I discovered during my day, this day of intentional cooking, is that everything can nourish. This is what I'm going to posit, and this is my challenge. Everything can nourish, no exceptions. So the first half of that day, my attention and my intention was fresh and careful and everything. It was just a delight. I was really just in the flow, making it happen and relating to everything and appreciating everything in front of me and the beautiful ingredients, attending to the task at hand with lots of love. So it's not so hard to imagine how deeply nourishing something like this is, right? We all have this kind of experience. But then the second half of the day, I started to feel exhausted, resistant. I was over it. I started being resentful and worrying about my talk. And what about being nourished there? What about being nourished in that place with those ingredients without shutting them down, just including that and actually being nourished in that whole soup of everything that was present? And what I discovered, at least that day, with a turn of mind, And it's what I sometimes call teaching myself the Dharma, because I can see what a mess I am, and I stop and I go, okay, Monshin, where are we here? But a turn of mind, I remembered that allowing and meeting these moments with love and acceptance could transform them into nourishment as well. And I really believe that, and I really had that experience. In How to Cook Your Life, which is a commentary by Uchiyama Roshi on the Tenzo Kyokun, he says, I love this, listen to these words. I wish to draw attention to the following problem. The idea of seeking happiness presupposes that at present we are unhappy. And so he goes to say more about that, which I will share. So I could choose to be nourished. I could choose that by aligning and including the tiredness. You know, we all get tired, and it can be fine. It can be no big deal. Just engage with it all. And I want to acknowledge that as I'm kind of rousing this spirit, you know, this was a day of cooking. It was lovely, and I was tired, fine. It's not as easy as enjoying a lovely but tiring day of cooking, because some of you listening to this talk, both at home and here, have a lot of challenges and hard situations. So just acknowledging that, I also believe that there's always a choice to find something to celebrate. Even just one thing in the day that nourishes us, and to turn to that and to allow that. Maybe it's just your one cup of morning coffee or tea, or maybe it's a kind word from a caregiver. So opening to those moments and allowing ourselves to be nourished rather than trapped. So to turn back to instructions to the cook, this is a little bit about magnanimous mind as described by Dogen, and it's really going into this teaching that I'm bringing in. He says, and this is Dogen, having a magnanimous mind means being without prejudice and refusing to take sides. When carrying something that weighs an ounce, do not think of it as light. And likewise, when you have to carry 50 pounds, do not think of it as heavy. And then he goes on, a dish is not necessarily superior because you've prepared it with choice ingredients, nor a soup inferior because you've made it with ordinary greens. When handling and selecting greens, do so wholeheartedly, with a pure mind, and without trying to evaluate their quality, in the same way in which you would prepare a splendid feast. And then this follows. The many rivers which flow into the ocean become the one taste of the ocean. When they flow into the pure ocean of the Dharma, there are no such distinctions as delicacies or plain food. There is just the one taste, and it is the Buddha Dharma, the world itself as it is. There is just the one taste, and it is the Buddha Dharma, the world itself as it is. And in his commentary, Uchiyama Roshi adds, in other words, we live out our lives to the fullest. There's no such thing when we live that way as superior or inferior, good circumstances or bad, fortune or misfortune. There is only the one taste of the great ocean of life. So the next day, Sunday morning, I was hosting a precepts discussion with our online Sangha. And we were discussing the fifth pure mind precept. And the Upaya version goes like this: cultivating a mind that sees clearly. This is the practice of not being deluded. I will embrace all experiences directly without the many intoxicants of this world. So it's not an obvious connection. This is the precept on not intoxicating oneself. But the center of this precept is, I will embrace all experiences directly. So usually I look at some of the different teachings when I'm going to host one of these conversations, and I was especially taken by what Reb wrote about this. And he says, the essential issue here in not intoxicating ourselves, the essential issue here is that we're dissatisfied with our current experience. And then in the book, he writes this lovely story. And he writes about returning to Minneapolis, where he grew up, and says, I hadn't been back to Minneapolis in the fall in 25 years. And he was stunned by the beauty. Everything was just on fire and gorgeous, and the sun and the sky. And he spent days just, really glorying in this environment where he'd grown up, in the beauty of the fall there. And he describes that really gorgeously. And then he said, and then after 3 or 4 days of that, we had a rainy day. And here's what he noticed. It was out and it was pretty. And what his mind said was, it would be so much prettier if the sun were out. It'd be so much prettier if the sun were out. So I'm going to read you a paragraph of his comments about that. He says, it does not seem like such a terrible thing to wish for a little sunlight, but this precept is gently indicating a way of being upright that is so much more at peace, and so much at peace that you're free of the impulse to bring something in. You don't reach for anything. You're content with the gray sky. If you want to realize the Bodhisattva precepts, then you should not blithely dismiss the natural and lazy human tendency to try to manipulate situations. At its beginning, it seems innocent, but it's not innocent. Innocence is to not touch things at all. Innocence is to not touch things at all. Innocence is to not even think of another color. So the request and challenge here, can you find contentment with your life just as it is? Do you allow yourself to be nourished by your relationships? Or do you just kind of wish that that person was just a little bit different? Or your situation was just a little bit different? Or your friend you appreciate, but you just wish that that person was just a little bit different? A good young friend of ours the other day was saying, oh, you and Chuck have been together so many years. How do you even do this thing? How do you do a long-term relationship? And, I said some things about tolerance and appreciation and some, I don't know what I said. But I was thinking about that in terms of being nourished. And also, one of the things that I think allows us to stay in friendships for many years and to appreciate relationships is to find the nourishment, to allow the nourishment that we can get from a relationship just as it is. Just as it is. And I also think that nourishment necessarily involves gratitude and reciprocity. Gratitude naturally turns us toward being nourished by what we're given and what we have. And gratitude naturally turns us toward the desire to nourish life in return. When we're nourished by what's given to us, content with our lives as they are, also then our consumer capitalistic culture that we're surrounded by, which depends on overconsumption, is undermined. Because if you think of that drive to consume and how easy it is to get sucked in, we're hungry ghosts. We're not actually being nourished by the beautiful, simple things that are around us all the time. And going into this season of Thanksgiving celebrations and Christmas, we should really consider the relationship between being nourished by life and our culture of overconsumption. When we're truly nourished by life, we're really not looking for the next bright and shiny thing. We're content. I was thinking about this whole Christmas thing and having witnessed different kind of Christmases with different, we have 5 kids, many grandkids, so we see their different styles, and there's the tearing things open, throwing it aside. I mean, it's painful. And I was thinking about that because we had this delightful short visit by a family that some of you the residents got to see in the last few days, Ben and Miyoshin, who are good friends of Upaya, and their little son Leon. And he was running around our house and just kind of being delighted by everything. But we have usually a couple buckets of water here and there because we save water, right? When we take a shower, we have our bucket. When the water's heating up to do our dishes. So there was a bucket of water in Chuck's studio. And Leon would run out and they would run in and he would kick the bucket and he would watch the water jiggle. And he wasn't like kicking the bucket to kick it over. He wanted to see the water jiggle. And it was like entertained him the whole time he was there. And we went outside at the end of their visit and we have a big tub where we also collect water. And he was peering over the edge and there were leaves. And I said, "Oh, Leon, do you see the leaves?" And he said, "Water." Anyway, it just, you know how much delight there can be. And, we kind of grow up and lose it and forget. It's nice to have kids around to remind us, but we can remind ourselves as well. So naturally, at this point, I turn to the wisdom of Robin Wall Kimmerer and braiding sweetgrass. And Hodenosane. In the version of the Hodenosane Thanksgiving address, many of you know this indigenous Thanksgiving address, and it's a version that she offers us in her book. And the question in that address, everything is thanked, every kind of being. And the question is repeated over and over. Can we agree to be thankful for all that's given? And then in her book, she quotes Frida Jacques, who is a clan mother and teacher, of the school nearby, and this teacher was speaking of the Thanksgiving address that the children in the school recite, repeat, I think once a week. And in that, each part of creation is thanked in turn for fulfilling its creator-given duty to others. And Frida says, it reminds you every day that you have enough, more than enough. Everything needed to sustain life is already here. And she goes on, when we do this every day, it leads to an outlook of contentment and respect for all of creation. And then Kimmerer writes, you can't listen to the Thanksgiving address without feeling wealthy. And while expressing gratitude seems innocent enough, and this is Robin Wall Kimmerer again, while expressing gratitude seems innocent enough, it is a revolutionary idea. I love that. So one paragraph from her as well. And I asked Manny to print some copies of that beautiful prayer. And as you leave, either he or a resident or someone will give it to you if you want to take it home, because it's a treasure and a good thing to go into Thanksgiving and Christmas with, truly. The market economy story has spread like wildfire, with uneven results for human well-being and devastation for the natural world. But it's just a story we've told ourselves, and we're free to tell another, to reclaim the old one. One of these stories sustains the living systems on which we depend. One of these stories opens the way to living in gratitude and amazement at the riches and generosity of the world. One of these stories asks us to bestow our own gifts in kind, to celebrate our kinship with the world. We can choose. If all the world is a commodity, how poor we grow. When all the world is a gift in motion, how wealthy we become. So just a few more closing thoughts. This is from Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, choose to be in touch with what is wonderful, refreshing, and healing within yourself and around you. So we can just turn to the gifts that are all around us. Let ourselves be completely amazed and nourished by the incredible display of these beautiful grand old cottonwoods, and by our friendships, just as they are. So we'll let Joanna Macy have the last word. She writes, I think all we can really affirm is where we want to put our attention. I have a choice. Do I want to give up and surrender to the great unraveling? Or do I want to join those who are working for a livable future? Since the outcome is uncertain, we have to enjoy doing something exhilarating and useful without knowing for sure if it's going to work out. Right now, we can be here to honor life. It's a precious thing to be giving thanks for what we have, instead of insisting that it must last forever. Well, it's not lasting forever. Can we still be grateful? Can we still be grateful? And can we still be nourished? And I have no idea what time it is. Just as I thought, it's just a little bit early, so it's perfect. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you'd like, there will be a copy of this Thanksgiving prayer that you can take home.